Good evening, everyone. Today's project is to rebuild my computer, my desktop computer. It's about 8 years old, running some pretty out-of-date hardware. We're starting to get some blue screens of death. We're getting a lot of just sluggish, non-responsive programs. So we've decided to go ahead and put a little effort into it and bring it up to a little bit more modern standards. So we have a tough gaming ASUS motherboard in the A4 socket, the X570 chipset. Dollar per performance ratio to get into the X570 chipset. This seems to be what everybody is saying is the best bang for your buck. We went with the AMD RYZEN 7. It is a, I believe it's a 3600. Yeah, we went with the 3700. AMD Ryzen 3700, 8-core, 16-thread processor with cooler. We picked up a graphics card. I don't know a lot about graphics cards. This one was on a Black Friday special. It's PCI 4.0, like the motherboard, so we figured we'd give it a try. We did pick up a 1 terabyte Western Digital M2 hard drive. Goes right on the motherboard, and we have 64 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to clean this case out, get all of our old stuff out of it, and we'll bring you along as we put that back together. So hold on while we get the case stripped out, and we'll bring you along. Okay, so now you can see we've got the motherboard out of the case. We've unplugged all the cables out of the modular power supply, so we're ready to go back together. This is a fairly decent power supply by Corsair. We're going to go ahead and reuse that. It should be plenty sufficient. And we're going to set this aside and move this aside, and we're going to assemble the new motherboard and get it ready to go in. So hold on one second. It's important to note that the I/O shield stays with the motherboard. There's a new one with the new motherboard. And on this board, there's a couple locations. There's one here, and there's one down under this heatsink. This heatsink actually has some tape on it to transfer, some compound to transfer heat. So we're going to use that one. We're going to put it down under that, and that way it'll transfer the heat off this. And what this is a Western Digital M2, 1 terabyte hard drive, basically. I mean, it's memory, but this will be used for the hard drive. It can only go one way because it's keyed, so we're going to put that in there like that. Set it down onto the standoff. Start our screw. Just like that. Snug that down. Then we're going to take the tape. Take the sticky off the compound, I should say, not tape. I keep calling it tape, but this is more of a heat transfer compound. take that off like that. And then that's going to go right down on top of our drive. And drive is kind of a bad word, it's really just memory, but alright, so we're going to move a little stuff out of the way. So now we're going to go ahead and set our processor in there. Probably the most delicate process. So we're going to unbox this. We'll zoom you out a little bit. And for now, we're going to use the standard cooler that AMD gives us. We may upgrade that at some point, but the part we're looking for right now is right inside this little box. Alright, so we've got to get a little light. On your processor, see if we can show you, right in that top corner, right there, is a little dot. And on the board there's a little dot. And those line up, and these pins basically just drop down in the holes. When you get it just right, just like that, it'll basically drop right down in. Shouldn't need any force. You might need just a little wiggle, but you shouldn't need any force. So we're going to hold that down with one finger, and we're going to rock the processor lock down into place. Now the CPU is installed. So we'll go ahead and get all that out of our way. And we're going to go ahead and put our memory in before we put our cooler in, just so it's one less thing in the way. Okay, now on your memory, it's also key to like. There's also these little ears right here that we've got to fold back to get the memory in. So the memory can only go one way. The key is not centered. So if we try to put it the wrong way, it just won't fit. So we're going to start right there. And you'll see when you get it down in, because that lock will lock it into place. All of our locks are in, our memory is seated. Now we're going to go ahead and figure out our cooler. So we'll get our cooler out of our box. Feels pretty heavy, so I have pretty good confidence it's going to work pretty well. So what I know about this cooler, or any cooler, is they typically come with the heat transfer compound already on the bottom of the cooler. So when we install this, we want to be careful we don't smudge that for fingers, or we're going to have to add some new compound. So we're going to go ahead and get this thing put in there. There's a couple ears on the circuit board that these latches go over, and you'll see they fold up to tighten up. So we're just going to keep the latch in the low position. We're going to set this down in there. Something like that. We're going to get that latch on this side hooked. Let's see what happened. The latch on that side hooked on me. So one side has a cam to make it tighter, and one side doesn't. So you want to get the side without the cam first, and then you can rock your cam right into place. Just like that. It is a pretty substantial cooler. So we're just about ready to go back into the case. We're going to go ahead and clean up a little bit, get our area reorganized. Okay, so as we go back together, the first thing we have to do is put our I/O shield in the case, as you can't put it in afterwards. It goes in from the inside. So we'll go ahead and open that up. We'll verify on our motherboard how it goes. Okay. So that's the top, which you'd expect by looking at the writing, but I always like to just double check it. And basically just snaps in. Being careful not to cut yourself on it. There are some sharp little pieces and shards there. Now we're going to set the motherboard in. And as we do this, we want to be conscious of all this stuff here, that we don't let any of those little fingers get inside any of this stuff. And they shouldn't if they were bent right from the manufacturer, but you know, if something got bent or you pulled on something, it is possible. So you want to just be conscious of that, because it can cause you headaches down the road. Okay, so we've got our motherboard installed. We're going to go ahead and figure out our graphics card now. Might not completely install it right now, but we're going to figure out where we want it. And then we're going to have to figure out all of our wiring. So your cases will come with wiring for the power button, the extra USB ports, lights, stuff like that. We need to figure out where all those go on here. The manufacturer of the motherboard will give you a diagram on their book. We'll show you that when we get there. So hold on, we're going to get a few things figured out. We'll be right back. Okay, so what we've done is we've tried to figure out if the two holes that we already have open are going to work for our graphics card, and they are. We're going to go ahead and put them in this PCI slot just because it lines up with that, and it's the only thing we're plugging in. So we're going to set that aside for now. I'm going to work on connecting all the connectors on the motherboard. So like I said, if you go back to the book does pretty good about showing you where everything goes here. And as you go through the book, it's going to tell you even more about it. And then we have to figure out now all of our power supply cabling and our cables for our drives. The only drive we're going to put in this, we do have a 6 terabyte spinning drive we'll put in here, and we have one DVD RW drive that we'll just leave in there. We don't use it a lot, but we'll leave it in there. We're not going to hook up either one of these drives until we get through the process of installing Windows. It's much easier, I find, to install Windows if there's only one drive in there. You don't have to pick from a variety of drives. And the spinning drive we took out has a lot of files on it that I don't want to lose. So that's how we're going to do that. So we're going to go ahead and sort out our power cables, figure out our graphics cards, and we'll be right back. Alright, so we got most all of our electrical work done. We have to go ahead and put in our graphics card and get that plugged into our modular power supply. And then we're going to get set up and get a monitor and a keyboard and a mouse and see if we can get a post screen, see if we can make this thing actually come to life. So the this here, we plugged that in initially just to make sure it fit. I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to go ahead and get that stuck in there. And this is a bit of an interesting one to put in. It kind of rocks into place, but you also got to line up the little ears over here at the same time and basically rock it right into place just like that. We'll make sure we're all plugged in. We'll get our screws and we'll put them in place. Now we're going to hold up on that, like that, while we tighten up these screws. And then we'll run our power cord. So we'll be back once we get the monitor and everything set up, and we'll see if we can get this thing to light up. Alright, so we've got everything wired up, got a keyboard and everything on. I'm going to turn the power supply on. And you'll notice we're getting some LEDs inside, so that's a good sign. We're going to hit the power button. Alright, so it's reading our drive. So we're going to go ahead and shut it off. And we're going to put our Windows boot disk in there and see if we can get it to install Windows. So because we've used this solid state drive, the M.2 drive, we tried to use it in the old machine and it didn't recognize the NVMe. So you'd notice it was trying to run the Linux program that was on there. We had to go into the BIOS, we had to tell it to boot to the DVD-ROM, which will then read the Windows disk and then write it to that. So in a minute, when it's done loading files, it's going to want us to partition all that and everything. So we're going to go ahead and go through that, and we're going to see if we can get Windows installed. And we are using Windows 7. I know it's out of date, but I know it, I understand it, and it works well for me. So. Alright, so as you saw, we're having a little bit of trouble getting things to work correctly. We were having basically the files would start to load for Windows 7, then it would crash, it would lock up, and we'd get blue screens of death. After a little bit of reading, I come to the conclusion really quickly that these new boards with the X570 chipset don't actually support Windows 7, which isn't really a surprise because Windows 7 is end of life. So this morning what we did is we went ahead and purchased Windows 10 and got it installed, and everything's running great. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.